This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org. Welcome to another edition of Maui Causes. Hi, I'm Sam Small. Eternal thanks to Todd Swan and Sleepy John in the control room, and to Akaku for providing a venue, a vehicle, a way to reach you with ideas and information that you're not likely to hear in other places. We don't have a lot of independent journalism going on here in Maui County, and so Maui Causes is dedicated to bringing you ideas that hopefully will generate some change. Our goal, our thrust is to be a positive disruption to the status quo. That's a necessary ingredient in a free democracy, because if a system is allowed to perpetuate for too long, it becomes corrupted. Big money interests, start having an undue influence into the structure of things, the way things are done here in Maui County. And the way things are done here in Maui County stem from, it's over 100 years of domination and control. So it's a very entrenched system. And as a modern metropolis, as a modern community, we as citizens have the right to demand better. And that is a process that has been unfolding over the past number of years. More and more people are engaged in the political process. Even though our voter turnout is very low, more people are participating each time, each vote, each election that we have. And that's a good thing. Because it's with your participation that the system can be rebalanced, that the control mechanisms can be deconstructed, so that you and your family and your children, your interests can be met rather than the dominant power structure, the powers that be. So we're looking to, stir things up, and, apologies to any of the power structure, but, it's just necessary. We're here, we're not going away. And as a modern community, we have a voice and we have a right to assert ourselves, and we're doing that. Fortunately, candidates have been coming forward who understand the difference. Candidates are willing to put their necks on the block. It is not a pretty thing to be running for office here in Maui County, I can tell you. It's very, very, intertwined. It's a small island. You can't get away from each other, and that influence is very strong. And so, as we as a community assert ourselves more and more, hopefully come to vote, register and vote and participate in the process. It's the only way that we're going to make change, because the power elite is already mobilized. They are protecting what they see as an entitlement. And they will protect that entitlement because it means a lot to them. And the rest of us haven't been so mobilized. And so we have to do things differently. They're going to continue doing what they're doing. We have to do things differently. And that means participating in voting, educating yourself on the issues, and understanding why the change needs to be made, and who you can elect to make those changes. So we're going to talk about some of the existing power structure and the existing structure of our county government with Kelly King, who is running for re-election as a county council member. So Kelly, thank you so much for the work that you've done, for putting yourself out there. Full disclosure,
this was sort of a last-minute invitation, so I don't have a whole lot of notes that I usually come with, but happy to have this conversation.
I think you'll know the answers to the questions that we'll get into, because you've been living it.
Right.
I'm particularly grateful, actually, to hear your perspective on some of these things, because you've been in the mix now for 2 years. And you've, seen you know, I've seen you hit roadblocks. I've seen, you know, initiatives that you've attempted to bring forward shut down by this system that we have, even from day one.
That actually happened before the first day, because that was when we were creating the committees. They took out a, you know, the prevailing vote took out the non-specific land use issues out of the planning committee where it had been and put it over to land use. So
Land use.
it really did take a lot of potential issues that could have been dealt with in the planning committee out of my purview.
Right.
Issues like Title 19 into land use, where it really clearly belongs in planning. I mean, that's the zoning code. And there's been some specific, been things like the policies on short-term rentals and things like that that have been taken out of planning because they get moved over to land use. Now, I do want to say that one of my biggest beefs about the process of the county council is that they don't do what the state legislature does, and that is if there's an issue that crosses over 2 or 3 different committees, they have all those committees hear it. So they either do joint committee meetings or they pass it from one committee to another.
Right.
And for our council, what happens is if something crosses over 2 or 3 committees,
right,
they give it to a completely different committee called policy, you know, the PIA committee, which may not even have a background in that particular item.
Right.
And so rather than saying, okay, this crosses over to 2 or 3, let's have a joint committee meeting or let's pass it from one committee to the next, it goes to a completely different committee.
And in the past, that was the committee of the whole, which they did away with.
Right.
And instead, you know, sort of created a, you know, a vague committee that is the repository for anything that's controversial.
Right.
As soon as something crosses over between issues, they just dump it over to Stacy's.
That's Yukile Sugimura's
to Yukile, who, you know, it seems to me will just do what the party line with the power elite wants to be done.
Right. So you know, there've been issues like the climate change, you know, the sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report that I worked with the Department of Planning and the Coastal Zone Management folks on creating a resolution to support that report and make sure that we integrate the recommendations. And you know, the council member Sugimura wanted to have it in her committee. And I said, well, you know, which was ridiculous because I've been working on it.
Right.
And then she said, well, because it crosses over to a couple different ones that she should have it. And you know, luckily that was one that I was able to convince the council to support me on keeping it in my committee. But it just seemed ridiculous, you know. So I do want to say that in the last week I got a call from Council Member Robert Carroll, who is not in what's remaining of this year. He won't be able to. He doesn't have enough meetings left to be able to cover all the issues. And 2 of those are the short-term rentals on Molokai, the ordinance, and then the short-term rental ordinance versus the community plan for Haiku Paia area. So he did call me up and ask me if he could discharge those to my committee, which is I thought was great. I mean, this is what should happen.
Right.
We should be working with each other and saying, okay, if I can't do this, maybe you know,
what
other committee that is related, rather than just throwing it back out there and having the chair or somebody just say, okay, well then let's put it over here, without talking to us and understanding what the origin of those issues are and what committee it best relates to. So I really want to mahalo Bob Carroll for doing that, because this is the kind of cooperation that should have been happening for 2 years, and it's unfortunate there's a lot in the last couple months that's starting to happen. But I've now been given, I'm also been given the word that they will discharge the issue of the parking lot at Keawakapu, which is something I've been working on for the last year with my community. So you know, hopefully I can close that item up, because I think we've come to a resolution. It just hasn't gotten on the agenda yet. Yeah.
Well, that organizational structure, you know, is there are 2 things that I'd like to get into. The balance between authority that the Planning Commission and the Planning Department have, as opposed to any authority that the Planning Committee actually has over planning. Our system seems to be wildly out of balance. the county council as a whole has very little authority over what the planning commission or the planning department actually does.
Right, unless it's related directly to a conditional use permit that then has to go from the planning commission to the council. I mean, for instance, we're going to be hearing some proposed changes to the SMA,
right.
Special management area,
right.
on Thursday in my
right.
committee. And this was originally supposed to be a presentation that was made to the Planning Commission. They didn't get to it in their meeting last week. I guess they lost quorum. It needs to get out in the public, so I asked them to do it. So they are willing to come on Thursday and do a presentation on their proposed changes.
I was at the Planning
Commission,
at the Planning Department's first meeting. That they had a public meeting like 2 weeks ago, a week before the Planning Commission. So the Planning Department presented their proposed changes and received
to the
community.
SMA?
Albert Perez from Maui Tamara.
Well, I wasn't invited to that. I don't get invited to a lot of the things that the planning department is doing.
And believe me, I only found out about it at the very last minute and sounded an alarm, essentially, that hey, community, this is very important stuff. If you're interested at all, this is taking place like tomorrow. Nobody knew about it. It wasn't because it was the planning department, it didn't have to be publicly noticed.
Right.
The planning commission had to be publicly noticed. But the planning department was able to just spring this out and whoever showed up, showed up. And we were able to go through a lot of their proposed changes, and some of them made sense and some of them were out of their minds.
So it would be interesting to see if they actually made changes
right.
from that meeting, that public
right.
meeting.
I'm very interested to see what
because I think they do seek input, and hopefully some of that input makes it into
right.
later renditions.
Right.
But my intent, and because of that, because the current form of it was not transmitted to me at the time of posting of this meeting.
Right.
We won't see it. It won't be made public till the day of my meeting. So,
right.
My intent is to leave testimony open so that we can have the presentation on the changes, then have testimony,
Absolutely.
and then have the council
Thank you for doing it that way.
Because testimony is very different if you know that they've already made a change that you wanted them to make. So, I think it's not fair to the public to ask everybody to come and give their testimony in the morning,
right.
then have a presentation, have people sitting there going, well, if I'd known that, I would have said this.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's a much better flow. Because I went looking to try and find, in fact, I called your office this morning to see if you guys had received any updates on the planning.
Yeah, well, we've got it now, but
proposal.
we're not able to post it since it wasn't posted with the posting of the meeting.
Right.
So it doesn't become public till the day of.
Until the day. And these sunshine regulations and public noticing of things is an important process. Mm-hmm. It's challenging. I understand things. Sometimes don't happen the way that they should because of that process.
Right.
But overall, it seems that is the current way things are done. So we have to abide by.
Well, and I think the council rules needs a revamping. So we need to take a look at those. The rules and see which ones are there because of addressing the Sunshine Law and because they're in statute and we have no choice, and which ones we have choices about that we maybe aren't making the choice that makes it the most transparent and the most open.
Right.
So those now that I'm getting a foothold, those I think need to be looked at to possibly make some changes in the council rules. But also I'm working on a resolution to present a different slate of committees for the council that are related to our general plan. So there are 11 or 12 objectives of our general plan, and what we should be doing is creating committees that can meet those objectives of our agreed upon Maui general plan that is in our county ordinance, and so that form follows function and not vice versa. This is the difference between having a program-driven budget and a budget-driven program.
Right.
You want to decide what objectives you want to meet, create programs to meet those objectives,
right.
and then fund that
right.
instead of trying to figure out okay, these are our committees. What can we do under the committees, and how can we fund that?
Well,
you know,
and that is typical. It's exactly, you know, the point that we're making in this whole show is that our system is ass backwards. And you know, intention. You know, it's hard not to wonder that the system that we have evolved in a way to essentially, from my perspective, to essentially subvert the rules. That the existing system does everything that it can to get around so that the powers that be don't have to stop doing the things that they're doing.
Well, and let's look at the very basic thing when you walk into the council. Everybody on the county council sits with their backs to the gallery except the chair. You know, there's a fundamental change that would happen if, you know, and I proposed this in the last budget hearing, but I got voted down. I mean, that was one of those clear lines between the 5 and the 4. Right. There's a fundamental difference that happens when you have to face the people that you supposedly serve. You know, and then they can see the body language and they can see who's sleeping, who's not, for instance. But the fact that we voted against that is there's something fundamentally wrong.
Right.
I have a little poster in my office that says the functioning, the arrangement of the furniture determines the functioning of society, and I truly believe that that's like, you know, job one.
Right.
Let's change. Let's, you know, turn ourselves around so that we're truly serving our public.
And you know, as you know, simplistic perhaps as that is, there is a functional change that brings.
Right.
And those are the kind of changes that and fresh perspectives that we need so desperately here.
And I wish those kinds of questions would be asked at some of these forums too. You know, let's ask these new candidates: do you support, you know, facing the public? I've actually talked to a couple people who are running, who are not on that Ohana candidate slate, who said that they would support it. But I would like to hear that in public so we could hold them to it.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of questions that don't get asked. You know, the community associations, you know, have their own filters. And there's a lot of difficult questions that none of the candidates are talking about that really should be talked about.
You know, one of the good questions that came up in the Kula Community Association forum was the article that was written in the Maui Time recently, the Maui Time Weekly, about council members not showing up for meetings.
Sure.
And I think that article made a difference because there, you know, I've seen more attendance lately.
Suddenly they're showing up.
But you know, just having that question and what do you think about it and what would you do with it? When I heard one of the new candidates say, I don't know any other job that you could have where you don't show up and you don't get fired. You know, you could keep your job. So you know, that's a fundamental thing, is showing up for work.
And the analysis that Maui Time Weekly did of the gender imbalance, that Mike White and Ricky Hokama just don't show up for committees that are chaired by women. I mean, it is a disproportional difference, and you can't ignore something.
Me too.
You can't ignore that, you know.
And you know, I felt, you know, I have felt bullied by some of the people on the council. Not all men. There are some women who can be bullies on the council.
And I know I've been lied to, bold-faced lies.
So you know,
that stuff happens.
I think that the attitude, you know, like I said, the arrangement of the furniture, the way we lay out our committees, those are all. So
you were describing a committee, you know, and changing the balance, the structure of it, so that and I just wanted to just retouch on that to make sure that people understand what we're talking about. That the organization of the committees, the way that it's done historically, and certainly the way that Mike White did it in 2017. It was designed to control the process. It wasn't designed from the top down to facilitate getting any work done. It was designed to stifle council members who want change. And that is a huge part of what we're talking about here. The organizational structure is designed and is being manipulated to stop change.
Well, and you know, I mean, that's, you know, something I'm not willing to make that leap
I'm happy to take ownership of that conspiracy theory if you want to, if anybody wants to call it.
Yeah, but I think if I can say probably the most important thing I can say today in this interview, and hopefully some of the candidates hear that, who, one of the things that people should know is that slate of Ohana candidates, which is fairly the same for several different organizations. But there's some, I probably have the broadest support because I'm also endorsed by the Realtors Association of Maui and
yes, you seem
Hawaii.
To be
so,
crossing over
I think I have a broad support because I try to approach things from what is the best for Maui County, and I'm not aligned with any particular organization, but I am aligned with my values and the objectives that are in this community plan. So, and I try to come prepared to meetings, and I think people of all walks of life appreciate that. But what I really want to say to all candidates is, don't come to the first, if you get elected, don't come to the first meeting having made backdoor deals. Don't come, knowing who you're going to vote for chair, knowing which slate you're going to vote for the committees. Come and listen to what's being said on the floor and make your decision there, because you set the future of the council agenda and the future of this committee or the community when you start with, I've already made my decisions,
right. It's
and I'm not going to listen to what anybody has to say,
right.
or what anybody's theory about being chair, because
deals have been made behind.
Yeah, and I think to me, we should discuss the committee structure. We should vote on a committee structure, and then we should give ourselves a couple of weeks for the different council members to look at the committee structure and say, which one would I be most suited for? Mm-hmm. Put in your request for what committee you want based on what your experience is and where you feel like you would do the most good for the community, and then make those arguments. And in the past I was told that committee chairs were allowed to pick their committee vice chairs. Mm-hmm. We were not allowed to do that for this term.
Right.
And so very few of the committee chairs that I'm aware of even talk to their vice chairs.
Right.
So it's not really
it's not a working relationship.
No, it's not a working relationship.
They're not supporting.
I'd like to see that happen.
And that's also a structural choice that was made by design. My spin on it is that that's intentional, and it's a cultural thing that needs to change, and it's part of why we encourage people to vote for some of these younger candidates for county council who have spoken up with a willingness to facilitate change, mm-hmm. Because it's that kind of dominating factor that is blocking change. And it's only through the vote, it's only through people's vote that's where the community lays the groundwork, mm-hmm. for that kind of change. We have to vote for the right candidates, and your call to the winning council members to also keep that framework open as you enter into the first day of session, and work it out in the public's.
And I know these conversations happen. I mean, they happened when I was on the State Board of Education. They happened when I, won
politics
my seat.
Is politics.
Is the very next day, people start calling and jockeying for position, and that will. I think if you can have those conversations without making a commitment, they may be valuable, because I would like to, I probably should have asked in the beginning, well, what is your idea of a council chair? Because to me, a council chair is a facilitator, and you actually work for the council. Mm-hmm. So your job is to make sure everybody has what they need to do their job.
Right. Your
job is to make sure that that disruptive actions are not happening, that keep other people from doing their jobs. Mm-hmm. Your job is to facilitate the Office of Council Services to work, for their council members that they've been assigned to, and their committees that they've been assigned to. And then, of course, you have fiscal responsibility. So your job is to make sure that everybody is allowed to spend their budget, their office budget fairly. You're not making decisions and allowing one council member to do something and not another council member to do the same kind of thing with their budget. Right. So it's about facilitation. It's about fairness and fiscal responsibility. And making sure that the processes are open, the processes for hiring Office of Council Services staff, for hiring the directors, for looking at those salaries. But, so I would like to see somebody who, understands that be the next council chair, because I've been on a lot of boards. You probably have too, boards and commissions and corporate boards, nonprofit boards. And, there's a difference between being the president of a board of directors, which is, you can tell people what to do. You're the president. When you're the chair, you're not there to tell people what to do. You're there to facilitate and to make sure that the body that you're facilitating for, whatever decisions you make, get translated over and get supported, even if that wasn't your decision. Even if you disagree,
you have to be somewhat neutral to the process.
Right, and I've seen, when they created that committee to, everyone knows that I'm a supporter of the professional county manager process, and we've looked at various iterations of it, which have not passed. But 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, when they had the council committee that was approved by the committee, it was a special committee to look at the county management, what's out there, what's been done, what's been successful, bring back a recommendation to the council. And that committee was basically set up to fail, to come out with a no vote.
It was predetermined from the beginning.
What happened was some of those people that were on the committee were very good people and actually did very good research and decided by the end of that, they like this idea. This is a really good idea. It's worked in a lot, and it makes it more impartial, gets the politics a little more out of the management. And so the recommendation was, yes, let's pass this through. That was what the committee recommended. The chair of that committee came to the council and called his own committee shibai, and spoke against that recommendation, which you're never supposed to do when you facilitate a committee. When you're the chair. You can do that if you're the president, but you can also stifle a lot of other things if you're the president of the board or whatever. So that's one of my pet peeves, is that people not understanding the structure and what that title means. It doesn't entitle you to lord over everybody. What it does is it charges you and mandates you to work for your council, to make sure all your council members feel like they are supported.
And is there no recourse when a chair oversteps their boundaries?
Well, not unless there's a majority vote to unseat them. So, it all comes down, the ironic thing is that if you have a majority that puts you in that seat, it's very unlikely that you're going to be unseated at some point unless you do something egregious, or the tenor of the council changes because of what things that are happening. I mean, that's what happened to Gladys Baisa. She was chair, and then whatever, I wasn't paying attention to the council inner workings back then because I was not really involved. But
she was
at some point, the majority of the council members changed their minds and said, "Well, we don't like something that's happening here." And so,
my understanding was that she broke an unspoken rule that you are not to support a candidate that's running against a sitting council member.
Oh, I really don't think it was that. I think it had more to do with some of her alignment with the mayor and some of his policies, but. Whatever it was, I've spoken to her about it, and it was a hard thing. It's a hard thing to get over when you get, in the middle of your term and you get unseated. But she's moved on, and she was able to continue with her work on the council as a council member.
As a council member, and now is the director of water for the water department, which brings to question. Now, you were not on the council during 2015, so you've inherited this upcountry water bill, the 2015 upcountry water bill, which is an issue that I've spoken about in front of the council, where the intent of that bill, through all the public discussions and even testimony of the lawyers from corporate counsel, the intent of that bill was to create a benefit only for families on the upcountry water meter wait list. And that started with exempting them from fire suppression requirements and expanded at the suggestion of the planning Public Works, David Good, suggested, well, if you want to do something good for these families on the upcountry water meter wait list, why don't you exempt them also from roadway improvements? And so that was added to the party, added to what was being given to these families on the upcountry water meter wait list. Not that many of them. That they would have all of these exemptions now that they would ostensibly get a second water meter, and by virtue of that second water meter, be able to subdivide. So they would now do a subdivision, a two-lot subdivision, and they wouldn't have to do all of this stuff. And it was all only supposed to be for families on the upcountry water meter wait list. However, the language that Corporation Council actually manufactured and inserted into Title 18 was never specific to the families on the upcountry water meter wait list. They wrote language that is currently being applied to two-lot subdivisions island-wide. So commercial developers are getting roadway exemptions for two-lot subdivisions island-wide. And that was never the intent of the bill. Now, Don Guzman has proposed an ordinance to remove that language from Title 18. And it's languishing now in committee waiting to be heard.
Is it in Water Resources Committee?
No, it's not. I believe it...
That's really where it should be.
Well, it was originated in the water bill, but the language influenced Title 18, and so it's gone to either Stacy or Yuki, I think. And it's sitting there. That language is still allowing today the planning, public works and planning to issue exemptions to commercial developers island-wide. It was never the intent of the bill. And all of the council members that voted for it everybody that I've spoken to says they didn't know. They didn't know that what they voted for was going to influence developers island-wide. It was only ever supposed to be for the families on the upcountry water.
Well, and that's why you see some of us, myself included, asking a lot of questions, because a lot of what we do is trying to eliminate unintended consequences when we're looking at in various ordinances and proposals like that, because you can see if the wording isn't exactly what it's meant to be, then how it could be, corrupted or subverted.
And to me, that's that's part of the structural problem, is that there are these loopholes, there are these places, dark places, that don't get illuminated. And whether it's council members just not doing their job, nobody read the language was. It had to have been brought in front of the council at some point. There was a change order, with brackets and underlines that,
and sometimes
the change.
Sometimes it's an unintended consequence that you haven't thought of, and until somebody actually takes advantage of it and does it, you wouldn't expect that to happen.
Well, and that is the job of his legislator, is to be able to track those things and tweak the legislation as time goes on. It's like, oh, we did this, it needs to be changed. And that's one of the things that I'm marveling, I don't understand. In 2016, we all voted for charter revision. That allowed the county council to have a legal opinion through council services that was separate and distinct from corporation council. We all voted for that. That passed. And that has not been actualized. That has not been facilitated.
And I've asked about that several times, and apparently the process has not been created, and it kind of reverted to what already exists, which is, well, we can do that, but the council has to vote on it, and that takes 6 votes. Well, we can do that anyway without that charter amendment passing. The charter amendment was supposed to, I thought, allow the individual council members to propose, other council if we needed it. But we're back to, well, you can do that, you can bring it up, and if you get 6 votes, Well, we could have done that anyway. We do that.
You didn't need charter revision to
right. So the
to
charter,
make that
charter revision, yeah, that was really disappointing because it has not been, and it has not been put into practice.
Right. And I don't
in any
understand
meaningful way.
what I don't understand is that as we went through a charter revision process and suggestions for charter revisions came through the council process for this coming election, why wasn't that brought back up? It wasn't working. We voted for it. It's not working. Obviously, the language of what was written in that charter revision to facilitate it needed to be tweaked. That language didn't work to get to reach the goal, and none of the council members came forward and said, "Hey, we need to fix this."
Well, you know, I'm probably one of the few ones that even asked about it for a whole year before I finally gave up on it. But sometimes you have to pick your battles. If you know you're not going to get the support of 5 council members, you know, I was hoping to get support on the county manager. That was the one big thing I was working on.
Right, sure.
And you know, when you make a change like that, which you know the county has been talking about for several years now, but you change. There's several sections you change, and then there's all these other sections where you just have to change one word because now we're talking about an appointed county manager.
Right.
You know, so you know I kept hearing, well, it's 40 pages long. Well, yeah, but some of those pages have one change on them. So why can't you read the relevant pages that have it and focus on that instead of I kept hearing over and over again the argument against it was, well, it's 40 pages long. How do you expect us to read all that? And which was to me just you know a way
on
of saying
such an important issue,
yeah.
you should be
Yeah.
willing to take the time.
Yeah,
I'm
and so
sorry.
I actually wrote, you know, and I made some amendments to it based on what I heard, and I actually wrote up a paper on it saying,
Synopsis.
here's the place where it's at in
Right.
there, and here's what the change is,
A
and here's
roadmap.
why.
Right.
And I still couldn't get, we you know, with the timing of it was not allowing for that to be well discussed and vetted out. So that was disappointing because in the end we weren't saying let's do away with the mayor. We were just saying let's take that managing director position and make it a hired position with a separate contract with a separate term from the mayor. So it's not politically beholden to the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get somebody who's really good, they could continue on beyond the term of the mayor if the you know the things are getting done and our goals are being met. And so, so that was the gist of it, having that separate term, having it hired by a committee of the mayor, the council chair, and 3 professional citizens, so that we get objectivity, we get a lot of connections too, because you might find somebody in another part of the state who would be perfect for this.
Right.
And then having that agreement be something that it wouldn't be just up to the mayor to, you know, you would have to have
Some consensus.
some consensus to let that person go or to keep that person on beyond the original contract. But that was, you know, it was clear to me that that was not going to be looked at until we get a more progressive council and hopefully people with business sense, because this is how you operate in a business.
Right.
You would never pick your friend to and I'm not saying that our managing director was picked just because he was a friend, but you would never just, you know, pick your friends out of a crowd and go, here, I'll give you this directorship, you this directorship, and you this directorship, and let's see if we can make some money here. That's not how business works.
That's how Maui's been run. You know, that is the legacy of the Arakawa administration.
But and I also want to say that, you know, I believe that our managing director supported this legislation, because I did ask him on the floor, if this were passed, would your job be easier? Would you be able to get more done? And he said yes.
Yes. Well, and those are the kind of structural changes that we need. Shifting gears slightly, you know, as chair of planning, I know you've got, you know, an understanding of how development can happen here and what kind of, you know, what we need as a community. And it's, you know, housing, of course, is one of the big issues. And I've been getting an education myself on some of these things, and I've come to an understanding the difference between developers and home builders.
But you can be both.
You can be both, but the functional difference is that a home builder is building a home on existing infrastructure. A developer is taking raw land and first adding the infrastructure, which is a tremendous expense. They're first adding the infrastructure so that homes can then be built. We've got lots of open space in areas that are already developed. They just need houses built on them.
So you're talking about infill, like, you know, I mean, Maui Lani is a perfect example. We've got these 50 lots there.
Yes.
They're already got the infrastructure. The person who heads up the HOA board came and did a presentation to the council and said that she would be willing to work with us on their CC&Rs to, you know, bring in affordable housing. And we just don't have an administration who has the creativity and the wherewithal to go out and find and you know, I've talked to developers who might be interested in that if there was a way they could work it towards you know, not losing their shirts on it. And there's been some really creative ideas I've found. My biggest issue is not with developers versus homeowners. It's developers who understand the communities and developers who don't. Because and this is one of the biggest barriers I feel to getting affordable housing built is people who come into a community and work with that community on a development and saying, how can we make this fit in? Understand the community plan before you ever even draw up your plans to see if it fits in, and then work with. And I'll give you a perfect example is the Kaiwahine Village up at the top of Kaiwahine Street in North Kihei. That was a project that a previous developer was going to build affordable homes, and he went bankrupt, and so nothing ever happened there. But I got involved in it because one of the neighbors on that street came and talked to me early on in my term and said, you know, this road was supposed to be paved by that developer, and now Public Works won't pave it because they're saying it's the developer condition, and the developer has gone bankrupt. So what does that do for the neighborhood? Nothing. Nothing. And so I started looking into what was happening.
That's an issue of enforcement
Well, no, you can't enforce somebody who's bankrupt. They're gone.
But it doesn't. Bankrupt isn't always the.
No, but it's an issue of, you know, compassion, I think, for the Public Works Department to come in and say, okay, well, this is not going to happen. You know, how can we get this done? But so what I did was I searched to find out if something was going on, and I found Doug Bigley, who's with Urban Housing, I can't remember, Communities, and he was attempting to buy this project, and he wanted to turn it into 100% affordable rentals. So I called him up and said, can you come meet with me next time you're on Maui? And which he did. And I said, the first thing you need to do, when I looked at his proposal, I said, the first thing you need to do, you know, great, we need affordable rentals in Kihei. We really do. And his project addresses the 30 to 60% of median family income, which we have not seen in my lifetime on this island, you know, in this capacity, 120 units. And so I asked him to go meet with the Kihei Community Association, which he did, and he met with them several times, and he made some changes based on some things that they asked him to do, and now they're behind it, and now the community's behind it because we know we need this kind of affordable housing. He's a developer, but he's made his project fit into our community. He's respected the wishes of the community, and he probably shaved 3 to 5 years off his project because now he doesn't have to fight for years like the Wailea 670 project, you know, 25 years later, and they still haven't broken ground. So these are some of the bigger issues. I mean, communication is really the key to so many things. And if you truly are doing something for the community, then you don't mind meeting the community, and you don't mind looking at the community plan ahead of the time when you actually are drawing up your plans.
You would want to know that you've got your ducks in order, that everybody's going to be in an alignment and not have those surprises.
Right. So to me, you know, this is.
I think most developers are perfectly willing to meet their obligations. You know, it's only.
Well, they don't know what their obligations are. You know, and most developers don't meet with the community before they draw up a plan.
Right.
You know, I mean, we've experienced this with the whole supposed mega mall, is what we call it in Kihei, the P Line Promenade, that was supposed to be this giant mall on a land that's zoned light industrial, and so the community fought back against that for years, and it's probably one of the reasons why I won my seat, because you know my predecessor was basically in favor of it and telling the
Facilitating it.
community that there's nothing we could do. Well, there was something
There was
we could
plenty
do.
to
We
be
all
done.
came out and testified at the Land Use Commission, and they voted against it. But the point is that when the owners, then they got new developers. Charlie Dinks left the island, residency-wise. But
Well, he's still quite influential.
But
He's involved
but the
in
new
Himalaya 6-7.
developer that what they did was they went in and they drew up new plans and they came to the community, and what they should have done was, after that fiasco of the first iteration of the mega mall, they should have come back to the community with a blank slate and said, what do you want to see here? Let's do a charrette.
Let's work together.
Let's do an exercise. Let's have, because not everybody wants the same thing in our community either. So getting the community together to hear each other's concerns and
You're never going to please everybody.
No,
but you learn so much through the process.
Plus being in the same room and me hearing one of my neighbors saying, I don't want a grocery store up there or whatever, whatever it is they're doing.
Whatever it is.
Having that conversation in public is valuable to our community.
Sure.
Having that conversation without preconceived ideas is valuable to the developer.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity lost, I think, because there was a big uproar about the plans that were drawn up.
Sure.
And some of the meetings that they had with our ahamoku, our native intelligence in our community, that didn't show up on those plans.
Well, and the administration doesn't facilitate those kinds of things. They just try and bowl things over and pave the way for developers. You talk about a developer that went bankrupt without doing what they were conditioned to do through their permits. Modern municipalities, take fees in lieu. You take an upfront, deposit. They put a bond. So that that money is there, and we've had certain circumstances. I don't know the names escapes me, which project it is. There's currently a project that has a problem. They originally had millions of dollars set aside, for infrastructure, and at some point the director used the director's discretion and allowed them to cut their fund down to like $500,000. They allowed them to pull money out of their bond fund. What was protecting the community's best interest, the director used their discretion to eviscerate that fund. And now everybody's stuck. And it's those kinds of director's discretion issues that are fundamentally subverting our community's best interest. This is particularly important to me in what you're experiencing on Thursday. These new rules from the planning department through the planning commission that, first of all, that they get to do that. The planning department is hired by the administration. The planning commission is appointed by the administration, and the county council has very little to say over what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we need to look at too, because
how do we fix that?
That would be probably a charter amendment, because some of those things are instituted in our charter, but that is policy. The SMA rules are policy, and they affect us so widespread that it really needs to be looked at in terms of, do we need to institute either a charter amendment change or an ordinance that gives the council the final say, because we are the voice of the people.
Right.
So that's the balance to the administration doing what it wants to do. And some of the some issues, administrative rules, should be under the purview of the administration, because there are things that's why we elect the mayor. Right. But things like SMA rules are they are long-standing. They affect a lot of people, and luckily the one thing I want to...
And some of them are mandated on the federal level. So how is it? It's bizarre to me, because the Coastal Zone Management Act at the federal level requires the state to have a coastal zone management system. The state has a coastal zone management rules. They freelance that. They subcontract that out to the county, so that Maui County is empowered to assert the coastal zone management rules. Right. And the authority goes to the director of the department, who now the planning commission is talking about giving that same director more authority to subvert The coastal zone management
well, and
rules.
you know, I mean, those
How
rules
does
are
that work?
promulgated from the department, so they're promulgated from the changes from the department, then they go to the Planning Commission for approval. So if the Planning Commission approves those changes,
but both are politically appointed. So
Yeah.
neither of those bodies are representing the people's best interest, and that is a huge structural flaw. It was you know.
Yeah, the argument against that is that the council gets to approve the members of the boards and commissions.
Nah, I don't
However,
buy that.
we approve these names in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And I've asked the committee chair, and I've asked who sent a letter to the mayor, can we get a list of all the people that have applied, so we can know if you're picking the very best person out of this list.
No, that's
and
manipulative.
the letter we got back from the mayor was, I will not give you that list.
Right.
So, I mean, I try to explain it to our chair and people who, don't understand or don't get that we don't really have a choice by
and that's one of the reasons that
saying that it's like putting a ballot out there that says South Maui County Council member Kelly King, and you can either say yes or no. If you say no, we'll give you another choice, but you won't know who that is until you say no.
Right.
So that to say that we get to pick those people is sort of a half excuse.
In our last few minutes here, what's your hope for this election and going forward into the next term?
My hope is that folks will look at every candidate, get to know the candidates, vote for the ones who are open and honest and really want transparency and haven't already declared an alliance, because even to the progressive side, I mean, if you're progressive, you need to let people know what you stand for, and I think of myself as progressive. But to have an alliance already to a majority, if they get elected, I think is disingenuous when you say you're representing the people and you want to do the best for Maui, and that we get a council that looks at every issue and makes decisions based on our countywide policy plan, which has our principles and our goals and our vision in it, and the general plan, and listens to the testimony that comes in. Because those are people who are standing up, and they do represent the community.
Those plans that you talked about have been, in past administrations, they've been weakened in their authority. Where do you stand on
the plans?
The
countywide policy plan is pretty strong. It just hasn't been used. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, those two documents, I don't think they're necessarily weak documents. I just think they don't get used. And so I think that's another question for some of these political forums, is that, do you even know that we have a set of institutional principles? Because there's so much divisiveness that's happening in our country right now, and it's filtering down that we tend to see ourselves as either on this side or that side. Mm-hmm. And I really don't like the talk that's going on about local values, because values are values. If you are honest and you believe in family and you believe in transparency and you respect the environment and all the things that are in our countywide policy plan as our guiding principles, it doesn't matter if you were born here or not. Mm-hmm. You're a principled person that has values. So that word, I mean, I don't know if people who use that word are trying to divide us into those who were born here and those who weren't. That's disturbing to me, because we all live here and we all need to work together. I think we all respect the environment. We all respect the local culture. We all we value families. We value education. We value our parks. We value the things that we value, regardless of whether you were born here or not. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people, like in the Filipino community, who are not born here, who live here, a large part of our community, a lot of ethnic people. Not just, people who are Caucasian, which I don't know if that's the intention, is to separate that out. But anything that divides us, I think we have to be cautious about. This is a huge message, because there's so much divisiveness at the federal level with the current president and the current administration. Sure. We have to be really diligent in Maui County and in the state of Hawaii that we're not dividing ourselves, that we're bringing ourselves together around these values that are very good. Every ethnic community has the same values to me. My background is Japanese. Yeah, they value family, they value education, they value the environment. the Japanese, the country of Japan is against war. After what happened to them in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's probably one of my biggest issues about this election is that, get past those words and, for voters, look at individual candidates, learn what you can. There's a lot of information out there on the internet.
And a lot of misinformation as well. There's mischaracterizations.
Yeah, but if you look at a video of a candidate saying something, that's who they are.
Right.
And if they say something that's a lie, that's who they are. If they say something they haven't researched, that's who they are. Everybody I talk to who's a candidate, I say, don't say things unless you've researched it out and you can cite where you know that information from.
Sure.
So that's my biggest hope for the council is that we'll get thoughtful, hardworking council members who show up, who listen to new ideas, who are willing to try new things, because we're not going to solve our problems by using the same mentality that created them. We need fresh ideas, and we can't be pushing back against everybody who wasn't born here, because those might be the ones who have the best ideas. We borrow ideas from the mainland all the time, and sometimes we push back against them because they're from the mainland. We should be pushing back against bad ideas because they're bad ideas, not because they came from somewhere else.
Right. It is a civic responsibility, and here in Maui County, our future really depends on it. Whether the island will be developed 100% built out, so that Maui County becomes like Oahu. And that our reefs and shorelines are destroyed by overdevelopment. These are the issues that we're dealing with, and it's extremely important for you to participate. So we welcome you to get out and vote. Kelly, I know you got to run back to the session at the County Council. So thank you very much for everything that you've done and will do, and best wishes in your campaign.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Join us all again here on Maui Causes. I'm Sam Small.
All right, aloha.
This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.